interested in this conversation, kindly engage us, give us your feedback, what you think about this conversation on youth and climate action. We want to have this conversation with my panel in studio, and seated right next to me is Brian Kidinji, who is the Executive Director, Policy Action Initiative. I got that right, Sundar?
Yes.
Good. Then next to him is Elijah Bakari. I did say that right.
Yes, you did.
And he's the head of research at the Policy Action Initiative. Thank you so much for making time for this conversation here on Lookuptv. This is the first time I'm having you here, right?
Yes.
All right, now let's just get to it. We're talking about youth and action, youth and climate action. Why is it important? Let me just start with you, Elijah. Why is it important for youth to actually be involved on matters climate change?
For starters, I always say that, as we know, those of us that are present here right now, it is not that we inherited this earth from those that came before us, but rather we have borrowed it from our children. And the people who will stay on this planet longer than those who, are much older are definitely the youth. So anything we do wrong to this planet, if this planet is going to punish anyone within the human race right now, it is going to be us who are the youth, because we are going to live much longer on this planet to face those consequences. So if you're a youth, and there are consequences to climate change, you are definitely the one who's going to suffer.
Okay, so that is important then it becomes, from what you're saying, then it becomes important for us to actually have this conversation and, the youth taking their place. But this is the thing, what is the place of this? Because in most cases, we'll just say the youth need to take their place when it comes to matters, climate action, climate change and all that. But what is this place?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us. So, when you talk about climate action, we are looking at 4 specific areas: climate mitigation, climate adaptation, climate mobility, and climate financing. And when you look at mitigation, it's about reducing emissions. So for example, when you talk about tree planting, the whole idea is capturing carbon from the atmosphere. So you're trying to reduce the emissions, the carbon that is in the atmosphere, because the trees capture it and store it in the ground. Okay. When you talk about adaptation, it's about adapting to the new and changing reality. It's accepting that we cannot stop climate change because it's continuing and developed countries continue to pollute. So what you're going to do now is that you're going to adapt to the reality by creating technologies and infrastructure that align to the shifting realities. And when you talk about climate mobility, we look at, for example, we know that last year, over 286,000 Kenyans were forced from their homes because of droughts that was in the northern frontier of Kenya. And it's going to become more and more prevalent if we're going to see rising sea levels along the coast, if you're going to see rising waters. Okay. So, and when you talk about climate financing now, it's about raising money for you to do all these projects. So as young people, we fit in all this, because when it comes to mitigation, we are the ones who are going to do the tree planting. When it comes to adaptation, we are the ones who are going to come up with technologies and innovations to address the changing realities. When it comes to mobility, it is us who are the ones who are being forced to move. Because if you go and look at documentaries about aid, you will always see that in the communities, it's always the women who are left and the babies. The young people have already been forced out because they have to go and make a living to feed their families. And when you talk about climate financing, it is young people who need the financing more, because we know that their futures are affected. We know that the government cannot continue to invest in social sectors because they are spending 9% of their GDP responding to climate-related disasters. So we know that they need an injection of finance, which may not come from the government, but which needs to come from entities in the developed world.
Now, this is the thing. I think the conversation around financing has actually been taking center stage. But before we come to that, do you believe that the youth are actually very much involved in this conversation as we speak? Because we did have Africa Climate Summit here in Kenya, and right now we have COP28 in Dubai. Are the youth rightfully involved in this conversation right now?
The youth are rightfully involved, but unfortunately that is not everywhere. That is to say, there are places where the youth are adequately informed, and there is places where the youth are actually trying to take action. But the places where you go to the ground and people really do not know, why are we planting trees? Now, when you deal with especially government officials, we recently had the tree planting day. We had to do a whole national holiday to plant trees. There are a number of Kenyans who did not plant these trees. In some of the areas where a number of government officials tried to implement the planting of these trees, communities asked, why is this necessary? What is the benefit of these trees? In fact, some adaptation that some leaders we spoke to had to take on was encourage the planting of fruit trees instead. Because when we planted fruit trees, then we tell them we are planting fruit trees so that you can eventually eat of the fruit. Not everyone understands the whole idea of carbon capture and why it is that it is important to have tree planting going on and how it affects our climate, our environments, and all that. So there is there is a number of youth, yes, that are involved in this conversation rightfully. There is also a smaller number that is taking action, because there's also a lot of talk, but not adequate action.
Okay.
That's why some of us are really trying to ensure that action is taken, right? So there is an adequate number that are informed, a smaller number is taking action, but generally, not enough youth have adequate information, and so it is necessary to also take this conversation further on the ground.
Okay, because my next question was to be, where is the disconnect then? But as you seem to have answered that, then how do we get them involved in this conversation and just say, okay, it is important for you to be part of this conversation. Moving forward, we need to be taking action. How do we make them involved?
I'd say civic. I'd say civic education, so to say, and this can be done. You know, there are different ways of doing it. Of course, government, if government wants to take its own initiatives to do that, that's great. And then again, there's people like us who are, you know, getting on the ground and ensuring that we pass this information. And it's not just us. There's several other organizations, several other youth out there that are determined to help people understand what is happening. Because for some people, there's just been a change of rain patterns. We can no longer predict when to farm. We cannot predict a harvest and all that. That's all they know. But some of us understand the intricate science of why that is going on. So when we get to the ground and explain to these people the detail of this thing, explain to them the effects of the cutting down of trees, the dereliction of our forests and all that, then they come to understand what is happening. So the next time, hopefully, the president declares another national holiday to plant trees, there'll be more people planting trees. And perhaps I should just let this out about tree growing. This country, we do a lot of tree planting, but inadequate tree growing. And the reason we also again have inadequate tree growing is because, you know, people do not understand that after we plant trees, that's not enough. We need to take care of those trees so that they can grow and eventually give us shade and whatever else we get from trees.
So it is different when you just say tree planting, because you actually have to plant it and make sure that it actually grows to maturity.
Oh, and we really plant in this
You
country.
wanted to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to add the fact also about civic education. It's very important, but one thing that you have to remember is you have to contextualize the message. So for example, if you're going to go to West Pokot or if you're going to go to Baringo, we are not going to talk to them about rising sea levels because they do have an ocean over there. If you're going to go to the Lake Victoria region, you're not going to talk to them about drought because we know that these areas naturally, they experience a lot of rainfall because they live next to a large body, water body. And when you go to the northern frontiers, you're not going to talk about, for example, prevalence of invasive species like water hyacinth. So it's about contextualizing the message, ensuring that we tailor, because climate change is not a one-shoe-fits-all for everyone. So we have to tailor the message. If you're going to go to Lamu, we talk to people about prevalence of vector-borne diseases like chikungunya, malaria, which have shot up because of the frequency of floods. If you're going to go to the informal settlements in Nairobi, we're going to tell them about flooding, because we know that when it floods in areas like Mathare or Kibera, these people lose a lot of economic hours because they can't go to school because the drainage bursts, so they are left to stay at home, or they lose their livelihood, so they have to start afresh. If you're going to go to the northern frontiers, we talk to them about drought because that is what they experience. If you're going to go to areas that the riparian areas next to the large rivers, River Tana, River Sabaki, we talk to them about flooding. So it's about contextualizing the message so that I as a young person can feel this is where climate change affects me, because if I was in Nairobi and you talk to me about drought, I don't think it really resonates.
People don't get it. And this is the thing. Right now, the country is experiencing floods, and we do have close to 37 counties actually, having been hit by floods. And I want us to speak to people watching out there so that they get to understand there's a percentage of this that is because of climate change. What do we tell them?
Yeah. Okay. So first, we have to talk about this thing because there's always an argument. You see, if you say floods are a result of climate change, you tell me that before 1800s, because that's where climate change caused by human factors began, because that is the start of the industrialization age. If you say it's caused by floods are caused by climate change, it means before 1800 there are no floods in the world, which is not true. So when you talk to them about flooding, we talk to them about the increasing prevalence, the intensification, the irregularity of the floods. We know that in Kenya there is a pattern of rainfall. We know that in March, April, May, it usually rains, and in November there are light rains. But when you look at these days, what is happening, it no longer rains in March and April. The rainfall comes irregularly. You don't even expect it. No one expected that in November, you won't be able to go to the beach in Mombasa. No one predicted that. But look at what has happened. So we talk to them about the regularity, the frequency. And that, we link it to the climate change. We link it to the fact that the increasing emissions, the increasing use of fossil fuels is causing this. And we are not telling them to stop using fossil fuels because we understand that we are a developing country. We need to industrialize. We need to create jobs. We need to create opportunity for young people. So telling us to go and use electric vehicles is not going to work because we don't have the finances. Many people don't even own a car, for example. So how are you going to do it? So we have to tailor the message and say, we are going to talk about climate adaptation. We are going to talk about mitigation in terms of carbon capture with planting trees, and in that way, you can benefit from carbon credits. So it's about tailoring the message in a way that is realistic for me as a young person to buy.
Okay. You know, I'll come to you about carbon credits, but you want to
I am greatly tempted to talk about adapting and all that. Now, you realize that in this country, for example, as a consequence of climate change and all that, we have periods of vast flooding that do two things. They destroy property, and then we also have people who die in the floods. That's number one. Then you also realize within a very short time or months, we immediately are followed by a period of droughts and failed harvests. So we have food insecurity as a result, and then we also have people dying together with the animals dying as a result of that drought. So at one time, excess amounts of water, right? The other time, it's dry. Now, you realize that these two can really be put together to cancel each other. And those are some of the solutions that we need to work with youth in order to ensure these are available on the ground. And some of the technologies that can help us are very basic. Some of them are years old, hundreds of years old. Technologies as simple as water harvesting, whether it is via dams, and we have other technologies that allow us to have this water above ground, put in tanks and all that, so that water is harvested and can be used during the dry period instead of flooding places. So instead of water flooding places, it is collected for future use. This is a very basic technology. I haven't started to go into the really serious technologies that need a real serious scientist to go into. So these are very basic things that we need to discuss and find out how we can implement this on the ground. We wouldn't have some of these problems if we did some basic things.
You see, the point you're raising is something that most of the time the country is flooded. People always talk about that. Like, why are we not harvesting this water? Then it's always a conversation. Why do you think that is the case? That despite having it as a conversation, we still don't get to implement it.
Remember what I said much earlier? A lot of conversation, very few people taking the necessary actions. Hence why we are action ourselves. We are an action initiative because that's what we need. But basically, that's what we need. We need to move from the place of just talking about it and start to do something about it. I hope some leaders are watching me as I give this conversation. Trust me, inside this country, we have people who are more than well able. We have the knowledge. We are well equipped. We just need to have a conversation now about how we're going to implement this in the rest of the country. Some of us have gone to school to study these things. They're engineers here, and as engineers, we know what needs to be done, but we're not in the places that can necessarily, get the public funding to do that. So as we have this conversation, let us also have the funding to do that. And I would tell you about how a number of organizations have gone on to show communities. Allow me to just digress a little, but I'll make this short. We, for example, have knowledge of the fact that when the ground is extremely dry, it does not absorb water and makes it much easier to flood. I don't know if people know that. But one way we can do that, there's simple things that our community can be involved in. You just dig holes that allows the water to just not flow exactly, so that it can really soften the ground and just allow water to percolate. This is definitely not like revolutionary technology. This is something you can do with your common djembe. And this really helps to already start to mitigate flooding if water, if it rains suddenly.
Then this conversation needs actually to go to the grassroots.
Exactly.
Let me come to something that you guys mentioned, when you're starting this conversation, and as you continue. It's the issue to do with planting 15 billion trees. Some people say it's actually impossible to do that. Where do we stand as far as that is concerned, 15 billion trees in this country? Because somebody was looking at it and saying, okay, for you to plant that, then people need to move. That's the thing, because you don't have enough land to have 15 billion trees.
Yes, actually, we do have the land. Because when you look at our population density, it's around 52 people per square kilometer. So we do have the land, that is true. But the only problem with planting trees, and the reason why it won't work, is because you need to grow trees, and trees take a period to mature. Another thing is we usually have a problem of we just plant trees without realizing what are the species, what is the characteristic of the soil that you are planting in. For example, you cannot go and plant baobabs in Central Province.
Okay.
You cannot go and plant acacia in Nyeri. Those are trees that do well in humid environments. You cannot go and plant gravelia in Kwale, for example, because that is a tree that does well in rainy and cool environments. So it's about knowing the soil characteristics and knowing the weather and knowing the climatic conditions of the area. The reason why it won't work really also, when you look about the land factor, is because in this country, we are not talking about restoration of the forest. And that is the main challenge, because when you come to restoration of the forest, we know that due to successive governments, people have already been given land. For example, when you go to Mau Forest, you find that people have already settled in what was used to be the boundaries of the forest. So in that case, you cannot replant trees there unless you move these people out. And that will be impossible. It can never be done, because that is a large voting base for any government of the day. If you move them out, you lose votes.
Okay.
So restoration of our forest will not happen. But what we can do is to plant trees in areas that had not been planted trees. And let nobody say that we cannot plant trees in arid environments. Look at Israel. Israel, when the country was formed in 1948 by Ben Gurion, their prime minister, when they declared independence, they had tree cover of only 0.2%. But today you go to Israel, the tree cover is over 8%, because there was a Jewish National Fund. They went to the Negev Desert. The Negev Desert is even drier than any part of Kenya. You know that in Kenya we only have, I think, only one true desert, the Chalbi, and it's a very small area. So they went to something like the Chalbi Desert, which occupies over half of the country in the southern part. They planted trees there, and they created a different microclimatic condition over there. So it's still possible to plant. It's the right type of tree. But in terms of restoring the rainforest that we have, that is already a long gone thing. It can never be done, unfortunately.
All right. Because I'm running out of time, and I'd like us to talk about some of, because especially now narrowing to COP28, most of the time we always have these conversations, and just like Elijah put it, then this COP28 is actually taking stock of whatever has been discussed along the years. Now, where exactly are we? Do you think, from where you sit and the people that you've actually got to interact with and the research that you've done, that we're actually making the right steps as far as this conversation is concerned?
If we're talking about the conversation, we are making the right steps. If you're talking about action, we are not moving in the right direction. Okay, we're moving in the right direction, but we are moving too slowly. We are moving too slowly, so there is definitely a need to go beyond the conversation and actually take more action. And maybe to just highlight the fact that, because I realize sometimes telling people that when we take action, it's good for the planet and for our future and for our children, some people don't even want to live that long, so maybe they don't care much. So let me bring the conversation to a place where everyone will agree with me.
Yeah.
If we solve climate issues, or the solutions we're also putting up to solve the climate crisis, these solutions have economic impact. Therefore, it is important for us to take up the solution. If you really don't care about the planet, I think you care about your pocket. Yeah. So let us at least take the economic angle of how, dealing with issues of climate change, the impact it can have on the economy. I will give a very quick example. I know we'll say more about it, about COP28, but let me just give a quick example. Did you know that the amount of solar insolation that falls on the earth in any 1 second is a lot more than all the energy we consume on the planet for a whole year in every form? So that means if, for example, we were going to just implement the use of solar as an example, I know it has some challenges with storage that currently we are solving, research is going on and all, but even at just the basic level, when the sun is shining, that means almost all our power, if every roof, I'm not even saying let's get new land and put up solar panels, I'm just saying if every roof had a solar panel and we had, adapted our national grid, for example, to adapting to also receiving power from consumers and helping, to just do that trade-off. Right at that point already, we have more than enough power for the whole country as I speak.
All right. Now listen, I'm running out of time.
Just to add a little bit.
Economics.
Yeah, just to add a little bit about COP. COP has actually been a very, very good opportunity, not for everyone, but specifically for small island countries like the Vanuatu, the Kiribati, the Solomon Islands, Marshall Islands, because it provides them an opportunity for them to be represented. And you know, these small island states are the ones who are most affected. But for Africa, we don't even really need to go there. We don't need to spend a lot of money. We don't need even to create more emissions, because you know air travel contributes a lot of emissions, because the conversations of climate have advanced here. What we need in Africa is about climate financing, and specifically reforming the international financial architecture to allow for investments in Africa, because we know that the problem that investments don't happen here is because rating agencies have placed poor ratings on African countries. All our economy, there is no one that Moody's rating or S&P rate it above A+ or A, which signals confidence to investors that they'll get their money back. Even if we know that the risk of default in Africa on any infrastructure project since 1960 has been 50% lower than anywhere in the world. So the issue about here in Africa is we shouldn't even be at COP. What we should be advocating is, let's, even if we are going to have a conference and people to travel, let's have a conference about reforming the international financial architecture to allow investments here, because we don't need any more conversations about climate.
I'm actually out of time. Now listen, I have a minute to wind up this conversation, and maybe just 15 seconds. That's what I'm going to give you.
Yes.
You know, when we did the Africa Summit here, there's the use of electric vehicles, and when that was done, we also forgot about it. Is this action genuine when we say we're actually for the climate?
I believe that it is genuine, but I'll go back to the fact that people need to benefit from that action. And that's what I'm saying. For those of us that want to solve these problems, let us show people and let us work with them on the economic benefits. As he's explaining, even when it comes to the restructuring of the financial system, a conversation, by the way, that our president has been trying much earlier to get it going. These are some of the things we need to look at. Let's look at the economic angle, and I think we will have an easier time. Because not everyone cares about.
Good.
Unfortunately.
15 seconds. You know, how does PAI just come into this? Or I just give you 30 seconds to summarize on that, because I'm totally out of time.
Yeah. So first of all, we've been doing analysis to evaluate the different policies that we have, specifically the carbon credit trading and benefit sharing bill. If you go to our website, you have an analysis about that. We also provided our recommendations during the process of formulating the Climate Change Amendment Act that was signed into law by President RUTO in August. And specifically, where every young person can engage, we have a program called the Green Campus Caravan. So we go to universities and train young people on the different emerging concepts in climate change. Things to do like carbon credits. We didn't talk about it, but it's a very, very big thing. Green bonds. We'll have another time to discuss it. The renewable energy, my colleague talked about it. So we train them about these aspects in order for them to be environmental advocates. We don't want them to be climate advocates, because we know that climate is limited. It's only about those 4 areas that I said, but environment involves everything, because even where we are today, this is an environment. We need good drainage here, but climate doesn't concern that, for example. So we have those 2 areas, the analysis and the capacity building.
Brian Kidinji there, who is Executive Director, PAI, and also Elijah Bakari. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. I do appreciate that. I'm totally out of time. My director is telling me we need to go home. We need to close business. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Right, that does it for us here on the Bottomline KE, a conversation that should be happening every now and then, but just not a conversation. After having a conversation, we need to take action on these issues that we discuss. Right, let's do this again next time. Do have yourselves a lovely night. My name is Brian Amwai. Our sign language interpreter tonight, earlier on, was Felista Adundo. Good night.